We are now.
All right. Hi, everyone. As always, we are getting started with our J-KUB live stream today. And if you want to put where you're watching from, we'll do a quick shout out as we do the finishing marketing post across the interweb. And then we'll go ahead and get started. So, Joe, if you want to get it going whenever you're ready.
Yeah, I'll start doing shout outs. Jay Donovan actually says, this had better not involve actual human body fluids. Hi, everybody.
No promises. Most likely not.
We actually have a few questions already thrown in here.
Oh, seriously?
Yeah.
It's a good thing.
I don't know why, but it's not updating. Oh, there we go.
They just start flooding in.
Yeah. Abrar says hello from Toronto, and Luis says hi, guys, from a sunny English evening.
Hello from a sunny, yeah, I would say pretty sunny Wisconsin evening.
Is it evening?
I'm sorry, afternoon. This is what happens when I'm typing, I'm reading, and I'm looking outside.
Jay Rinaldi says hello from Switzerland, or all of Switzerland says hello.
All of it.
Fabian from the Netherlands says hello. Sin Drawing says hello. I'm from California. Nice to see you guys again. It's nice to see you too. We have people from Barcelona. Go Barcelona. Huge fan of their soccer team. Cindy Kruger says hi from Arizona.
Hello.
And then I'll save the questions for when you actually start working.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm ready to go.
Okay.
Ooh, okay, let me close this. Hi, you ready, Joe?
Mm-hmm.
Hi. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's J-KUB Wednesday live stream. We do these every Wednesday at 2 p.m. for the 2D digital art side of things. And I've been even talking with Joe and Wes on what to call it, but I think I'm going to start calling it 2D just because sometimes we do traditional, sometimes it's digital. But in today's case, it'll be digital. But before we get started, I just wanted to quickly kind of show you guys some things that I received recently and I wanted to share with you guys. Okay, so the first one was we got another book from 3D Total Publishing. It is Sketching from the Imagination Sci-Fi, and about a month and a half ago we got the fantasy one. So I'm going to look through these and really dive into them to give a full book review on whether or not they are worth owning for yourself if you are a art book collector, like I consider myself one. But the cool thing was when I was looking through it, one of the first artists that I looked through when I opened the book was, I think it's Josen Gonzalez, and he has some crazy cool art, and the only reason that I knew about him was about a month ago, I ordered his book. I got his art book off of DeviantArt. Actually, that was kind of weird. It like fit my head. But he does really graphic, like Mad Max, futuristic, cool stuff, and it's just one of those artists that I found very, very randomly, and then I saw he had a book, and I bought it, and he was really, really awesome. Like, he drew me a burger on the front page, and then he sent a poster and this kind of like book cover. So if you're kind of into graphic art like this, where it's very bold and color focused, I would definitely check him out. We'll put links afterwards in the description. And then lastly, the latest Imagine FX was out, and while I haven't been able to look too deep into it, I know Joe has more than I have, just based on the artists that are in here, this is a great issue. I actually would say this one was better than the last one that came out. And the standout one, at least because I know me and Joe always talk about him, is Tyson Murphy. And he has a step-by-step in the magazine, so if this is something that interests you, but maybe you don't have the money to buy it, you can still go to like the local bookstore or wherever your local magazines are and check it out. It's definitely one worth looking at. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and start our SpitPaint. So let me switch. Oh, you know what, though? Before I switch over, I think we should know what it is I'm drawing. It's a little figure that I ordered. I've become kind of obsessed with 3A figures, and the artist for most of the 3A stuff is Ashley Wood. So I think that's another artist I will put in the description. This is one of them. I made sure to put them out before the stream. So pretty much what they are, they're like very detailed, textured, intricate, and usually original pieces of figurine work, I guess. And the newest one that I got, it's not even here yet, it's this yellow jumpsuit guy with this flat circular head, and I've been itching to draw him, but I haven't gotten it in the mail. So I thought maybe it would be a challenge what if I tried drawing it without the actual figure, without reference, or direct reference, I should say, and kind of work with that and maybe make it more of a spit paint. And that's kind of what has inspired this week's live stream. Okay, enough talking. Let me go ahead and switch over. And as I do this, I want you guys to ask any questions, even if it's not regarding character art or spit painting or digital art, anything at all. I know one of the things I want to talk about today, and if you want to respond specifically to this, it's about trusting your intuition. So on your questions, put a capital Q before your answer or to discuss it, and that'll be more specifically on talking about trusting your intuition. And I'll get more into that as I start coloring, but let me go ahead and make a new canvas here. I'm going to drag him over to a new one.
Before we start, there's a question in regards to the exercise posts that we used to have.
Yes.
Nikki Lohr asks, is there a way to access the old exercise posts, or have they all been locked in the previous Citizen Vault?
Terry, you got it?
Yeah, to answer that question, right now, we're trying to, there's a bug with the exercises that we're trying to migrate all of the old ones to the actual 5.0. And so technically now they're locked. What we will be doing in the future for our courses is we will be coming out with different exercises. So hopefully we can get that bug fixed and out of the way, so that way you guys can gain access to it. And the links, I'm not for sure, but the links might still throw you into the exercise on the website. And I'll have to check on that, though. People are like, what? They're already asking, what is spit painting? And define spit painting.
Okay. Spit paint. You know what? Let me actually Google this, because I could give you my definition and my interpretation, but I want to make sure I'm giving you the most accurate definition. It's definitely usually referred to in digital art, and one of the top searches is spit paint definition. Okay, so by definition, it's a subject, or it's creating a subject matter and painting it in less than a specific time given. So like in this particular example, it'll be like an hour and a half probably, and that's kind of what I'm limiting myself to. And the idea is not to come up with a fully rendered, realized, detailed character, or it can. It's very interesting seeing spit paints and the way people work it differently. Like for me, it's more about getting the idea of the character down and having it be fully realized, so when the viewer looks at it, they don't have to like second guess what they're looking at. It's very much in front of them. The idea is there, even if it's not fully rendered out. But sometimes artists are, especially the ones that are really, really on top of their game, they can make it look really detailed and have like accurate lighting and lay it out pretty fast and still have it feel highly detailed. So I guess it varies from person to person on what their definition of live or spit painting is, but in the overall sense, it's painting relatively fast within giving yourself a time limit and focusing less on, I guess, you're holding yourself back and trusting your intuition and just going, like really just letting yourself go on the piece. All right, I'm going to move this guy over though. So for those of you that might have been wondering how I even started this, and maybe I'll just do one on the side so I can show you as I start to answer some of the questions, because I can see a lot and I want to answer as many as I can while the stream's going on.
Jay Donovan asks, what is the difference between speed painting and spit painting? I mean, did you just kind of answer that?
Yeah, I mean, relatively the same thing.
Yeah. Alexis Mayfield asks, do the concept cookie courses come out monthly?
Yes. So the only thing with July is we were working on the color course to come out in July, but since I was working on the workshop and it's been eating a lot of my time, even with Joe doing the 5.0 migration stuff, we decided that we're going to push the color course toward August. So I'm not going to give a for sure date yet, just in case we have to push it back to the last week in August, but I'm shooting for like the end of the 3rd week in August. So hopefully that'll be when it's released. But yeah, expect about every month a new course to be out. Oh, and something that is kind of exciting that I forgot to announce earlier was we are going to do a contest in August. And that was something that I know a lot of you were wondering when we switched to 5.0 if we're still going to do the contest. And yes, so for the 2D digital art side, we're going to have a contest in the month of August. And I'm not going to say what the subject matter is, but I will hint at some themes. Think post-apocalyptic. And that's the only thing I'm going to hint at right now. All right, so what I was doing here is I was scribbling really fast the forms, and I'm not focusing so much on the anatomy. I'm really focusing on the outside look of the character, the clothing, and having the ruffles and the folds make sense. And I want it to feel grounded. I want the character to feel somewhat in a perspective. And when you're working fast, sometimes it's easier to lay out proportions more accurately than when you go slow, because when you go slow, a lot of the times you overanalyze and overthink it. I know that's a big problem for myself when I do my own art, is I go too slow, and oftentimes it actually makes it worse. So trust yourself, and if you need to, flip the canvas. If something looks off, grab a selection tool, select an area, move it out over, make it longer, or even warp it. You can use a transform tool or even a liquefy tool. Actually, I kind of liked it moved. Down. Then you might, if this really bothers you, don't let that bother you. Just cover right over it. Because when you're doing a base sketch like this, especially with a SpitPaint like this, you can't worry about those minute little details. And this is why I like spit painting, because I think it teaches people to allow themselves to, or give themselves the freedom to let go. Because a lot of times we are so meticulous about having a process on how we go about creating things that when you're doing spit paints, you're allowing yourself to let go of that process. Oops.
Nikki Lowers asks, do you have any suggestions for taking a drawing a step beyond the reference? For example, taking an ordinary profile and turning it into a sci-fi fantasy profile with additional features and details.
Yeah, I was actually just talking to Pavla, who's one of our social people on CG Cookie. She was asking me this morning about reference, and this is pretty much what I was talking about with, I highly encourage using reference. I think using reference can make your pieces bring the quality, not only the quality up, but there's an accuracy to them that otherwise wouldn't be able to have been achieved. So in terms of taking an ordinary profile, so if you look at your reference and you see the profile and you want to create a sci-fi fantasy, like you add elements to it, then maybe don't just have a side profile reference. Maybe have, like if this is your reference that you found on Google, this is your side profile, maybe you should also pull up some references of the elements that you want to add on top of it, whether it be, in my case, a lot of the times feathers or horns or something organic, or if you're doing sci-fi, looking at helmets or hard surface elements that you would add on top of it. So I think you're limiting yourself by only having the profile and wondering, well, how do I make it sci-fi and fantasy? Well, maybe do reference or do some research on the elements that you want to add on top of it. And a lot of the time, I like to use the profile as a base, and then you just build upon that. So I don't think that's a bad thing on just using the reference as the base. I think if you just use the reference and then drew over it, that's the biggest problem. So don't just do that. That's using reference incorrectly. All right, so that's how I would start my base. I'm going to work with this one, though, and we're going to get right into coloring it. So the way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to make a new layer underneath of this sketch layer. I'm going to actually grab some more colors to work with and lay them out on this palette in the corner here. Now, yellow is a tricky color to work with. It actually used to be one of my least favorite colors, and it took a lot of, I pushed myself on a piece where I used primarily yellow as the interest color, and now I've kind of worked into liking working with yellow. But I also understand that with yellow, you have to work a lot with the shadow values of yellow and not letting the saturations overrun the piece, because sometimes yellow is overwhelming. It's very attention needy. So I think having a more neutral, almost dulled down yellow be the main focus, and then having the highlight areas or areas where you want to pull the eye, have those be more saturated.
Benedict asks, can you talk about the importance of silhouettes, how an interesting shape can make the design progress easier, and how to spot problems in the overall form of a character concept?
I mean, you kind of answered the question. But yeah, so silhouettes do just that. If you have interesting shapes in the silhouette, so before you even start, so let me fill in this with the silhouette. Maybe that will help better explain this. Because I remember when I was in school, we always talked about how if you can't really read the forms of the character just from the silhouette, or if the silhouette reads as very generic, then you need to redo your silhouette before you even work inside of the character. Because the silhouette can tell the viewer a lot about the character without even having to show the inside of the detail. So just from that silhouette like that, actually let me add in the axe that he's holding too. Because weapons add a lot to a silhouette. Oops, let me close that. Okay, so from the silhouette alone, if I'm able to look at it and think, okay, I like how these interesting shapes play together. This reads as more rounded versus these lumpy areas. And it would read better than if I had like the feet closer together. Having this triangle in here, this jagginess, helps the overall visual image of the silhouette. And I don't want to, I feel like I'm complicating it too much in talking about it, but when working with silhouettes, pretty much make sure that you have strong shape language. That should be the main priority. And then the second thing is that it reads well as a character. And the third thing is not having it be muddy or out of focus. Because sometimes if your character, or generic, because if your character reads very poorly, it's probably because the shape language isn't strong or the silhouette itself isn't interesting. So those are the tips I guess I can give with silhouettes.
Bad Bats Bobby asks, do you recommend to get one of those wooden art dolls?
No. Those are actually some of the worst to get, in my opinion. They don't bend at the knee. You can't pose. You can't sit them down for sure. If you really want to use the wooden doll, I would recommend finding one that's more posable, more accurate, and they usually be a little more expensive. The one I remember, I got one from a Kickstarter project, and it was all right. It was just too flimsy because it was 3D printed, and I think the material just didn't hold well up against its own weight. So I would not recommend getting that wooden doll figure, but instead finding one that's more posable and more I guess, in tune with what you would want.
I want that Boba Fett Square Enix one. Oh, it's so awesome.
Yeah, there are some awesome figures. Like, if you guys don't want a blank one, just get a really awesome one and use that as a reference.
Uh, uh, Bonser Music asks, will this cover improve our time while doing texture painting on the mesh itself efficiently and effectively?
Will this cover improve our time while doing? Maybe. I mean, I don't teach 3D anymore, but I know what you mean with a texture painting. I want to say yes, but you gotta be careful that when you pull, I'm assuming you're doing this for a 3D model, and when you pull it in a 3D model, I guess making sure that it doesn't just read as, sometimes it could be sloppy, where a SpitPaint isn't meant to be like a final product in most cases. It's supposed to be more of like a fun experiment usually, or a showcasing of like trying to generate ideas quickly.
There are some really good questions. I'm trying to find the ones that popped up first, though. Anime Ferris says, greetings from Russia. Do you have any advice for a situation one finds himself stuck with rendering, as in being greatly stuck in the middle of the process? The dreadful stage of, this looks fine, but I know it's incomplete.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Sometimes you can get pushed into what I call over-rendering, and I feel like I do that a lot, where you're focused so much on trying to finish it. There's a point where you just want to finish it. And I think that's one of the worst points to be at, because then you are either going to overanalyze everything or you're going to rush areas. So I would try not to rush it. If anything, I know I try to do this for myself, where I'll leave it for the next day. I won't try to finish it that night, because if I finish, or if I quote unquote finish it and then post it, I'll know immediately in the morning. I'll regret seeing what I posted, because in my mind I know it's not done. So don't post it if you truly aren't satisfied with it, but don't drive yourself crazy trying to make it look perfect if it's like sucking all of your time up. There needs to come a time where you're like, okay, and the best thing is just set deadlines. I think you then mentally allow yourself to call it complete, even if it's not perfect. And that needs to happen sometimes, where you just have to move on to the next piece. Because, man, I can't tell you how many pieces I've dragged the time along where I could have easily gotten another piece or even two done. So try your best not to let it drag on too long. But when you're in the middle of the process, and how do you push yourself through that? Have someone look at it besides yourself. Get some feedback. Get something where you have a fresh pair of eyes looking at it, and you can get some feedback that you might not have seen, and then that actually might drive you to finish the piece with that new information.
Divine Kataroshi says, do you keep your sketch on multiplayer or just leave it on normal?
Normal for this one.
I saw a question about gesture. But where did it go? Oh, crap. Nope. There it is. Deathclaw8 says, any tips on how to make your characters show more emotion? Even when I draw wavy hair or action poses, my projects seem to be lifeless.
Yeah, that's something that I used to get picked fun on a little bit from my friends that all my characters had like blank stares, and the poses were very standard concept, not T poses, but just standing, like they weren't doing anything dynamic. So if you want to show more motion, let me just read it again. Even when I draw wavy hair action poses. That's interesting. If you're specifically doing action poses and they feel lifeless, either do find better reference, take reference of yourself doing these action poses. Your perspective might be off, or it's in the handling of the actual action itself might not be done well. Usually I need to see more of an example to know what you're talking about, but usually in most cases it doesn't feel accurate. The motion or the action doesn't feel accurate, and what that does is then our mind almost sees it in like this weird, oh, it looks off. It doesn't look accurate. And that's not what you want, because then it kind of pulls you out of the idea that it's action and happening. And with hair can be such a challenge. You really need to make sure that the hair reads correctly, and maybe not draw every single strand. I think that might be something that, if that's what you did, usually that kind of pulls me out of it. Where have it more, even motion blurring, that can help a little bit as well. Because when you draw every single strand, it pulls me out of the idea of its motion, because it looks like a single frame, and it's too pretty, it's too perfect. And having it have a little bit of that blur to it can add that idea of motion.
What I was going to say was practice gesture. That's huge. And if you feel like you're becoming too stiff with things, try extending lines. It kind of sounds a little weird, but if you're drawing with just your wrist and your fingertips, try using your entire shoulder and over-exaggerate that line. That oftentimes helps with trying to get a pose down. Jay Donovan says, boy, that looks like Batman Goes to Silent Hill.
Oh, man. I'm sure you guys are just as disappointed if you know about the new Silent Hills being canceled. And the only reason I bring that up is because we played it like last week, I think it was, and man, that is such a good horror demo in terms of the jump scares. But yeah, I love the designs of Lisa, which was the ghost. It was very simple, and you didn't need it to be overly gore or bloody to resonate fear, you know.
Jill says, or asks, should you ever give a client a SpitPaint to show off the concept, or should you work it out further?
Yeah, no, I think you can, especially if it's concept art. Like, I think people get confused with what is the difference between concept art and illustration. Concept art is supposed to be quick and gestural, and sometimes in the books that we see where they're like concept art books, quote unquote, like they're finished beautiful renders and illustrations, where that's kind of misleading, because true concept art is really quick, and it's supposed to generate ideas to show usually art directors, and then they kind of decide whether or not to pass or work with them. And if they're passed on, then you gotta go back to the drawing board and create a new concept really quick. But it's not supposed to be like super rendered. It's supposed to be the idea. Because if you can get behind the idea, that's when you can start rendering it out and adding the little details and making it pretty. Because when you're doing even this, like this concept, I could pretty much tell what's going on. It's like, well, so far, I want to add more to it. But in terms of like the character, if the art director immediately, like if he did not want a yellow jumpsuit character, and if I spent the next 8 hours rendering this jumpsuit character out, yeah, it might look pretty in the end, but that's not what he wanted or asked for, and then I wasted my time as well as his money if he's paying me by the hour. So concept art is supposed to be quick and gestural. So doing a SpitPaint as a concept piece, I think, is totally acceptable.
Gordana asks, what's your advice for dealing with feelings or not feeling original or creative enough? Amount of content out there can be overwhelming and can really discourage me from developing ideas and finishing projects I give myself to do.
Not feeling original or creative enough. That's a good question. I think the idea of being creative is sometimes How can I explain this? Okay, so the artists that usually we see as the most creative are the ones that oftentimes implement their own sense of self into their work. So if you feel like you're not original or creative enough, try pulling from your own experiences. Maybe there was a carnival or a park that you used to go to as a kid, and there were things in that that really attracted you, or for some reason you really liked going to that park and you have memories of it. Maybe implement that. Or if there is, maybe you're attracted to nature, as many of us are. Um, Go to your local park and start drawing the different elements that you see there, and then take those drawings and then maybe create a woodland creature or something that is more organic driven. And the reason I say this is because when you pull from your own life, you're pulling from being original. You're not working off of your memory banks of things you see on television or TV, or not movies or video games, whatever it might be. You're pulling from your own experience, and that is unique to you. And the more that you do that, usually your art will register as being more quote unquote original, depending. Sometimes it does help seeing the movie and references and seeing where everyone else in the world is at creatively, but when you pull from your own experiences over and over, I think there's a connection between your art and the audience, and they can see that. But if you're really just feeling like even that is a stretch, I would implement that as well as branch out. If you really like in my case, I really like drama or things that aren't as maybe actiony. So maybe I should be exploring more action movies or sci-fi or something where I'm not as familiar with it, and that would widen my visual library because I have never really explored that. It's like unknown territory. If it was on a map, it would be like a blank. I have no idea what's over there. So the bigger the map becomes for yourself, the more that you're able to explore when you're doing your concepts.
Just says, hey Tim, I was wondering if you had already posted the pictures of David the Black Blood Bird. I can't seem to find them.
David, I don't remember calling him David. No, I did not post the Blackbird pictures yet. Actually, my mom has my camera, so I gotta pick it up from her before I don't even have them at the moment, so I gotta get them. But we did take a lot of reference photos of it. So if you guys want bird reference, we have a few that I'm going to be posting in the near future.
Nicholas O asks, is it advisable to paint with a white, black, or gray background?
You know, it's interesting. Well, I guess more often than not, a neutral gray background would be the recommendation. But that's not always the case. If you're working on a very neutral, heavy character, and you know it's going to be very neutral, then maybe working on a darker gray or a lighter gray, or even, I wouldn't ever work on a pure white, because I think that is a bit visually distracting for your mind. But in most cases, no, neutral is the way to go, but it's not like the set you have to do it. Like if you don't, you're not doing the process correctly. It's just usually the most recommended, so you can see your values and your hues at more of a pure tone.
Mars Lyric says, any tips on how can I match the size of the head with the whole body? Because most of the time it's either too big or too small if you're drawing traditionally. And how can I make the final result look okay and not like a baby crying? I say proportions is something you need to study.
Yeah, and match the size of the head with the whole body. Oh yeah, this happens to me from time to time too. Like I did a Knox drawing, and as soon as I finished, I was like, "This head is too big," and I knew it. I knew it immediately because I wasn't being observant while I was drawing. I just kind of was going. So I think being aware of it and then doing like a quick gesture sketch where you're proportioning it out and really putting a focus on that gesture and making it feel accurate and proportional. Because the gesture isn't just to like line up, then what is the gesture for you if it's not to try to line up proportions and be more anatomically correct. So be aware during the foundation stage when laying it down. And if it reads right away in the gesture it's too big, then you didn't waste any time, thankfully, and you can adjust it before you really get going.
I think a good thing that I think of is, especially I see like big hands and big heads on people. Look at the head size, and then if you take your hand and you actually place it over your face, it should take up majority of your face, right? My hand goes up to about my forehead, you know, not all the way up to my hairline because my hands aren't like huge, but that's a huge help. And then to know that depending on the style, the heads, like your knee to your bottom of your feet is like 2 heads. Everything is in proportion. There's a couple of diagrams out there that you can look at. I know, like I said, with style, it's some styles show differently, you know, especially with anime, where their legs are like gigantically long.
Oh yeah. But it works.
Oh yeah, I mean, oh, man, I don't know how you could possibly be like, oh, we're gonna elongate the legs and then have it work. Because in my mind, I would be like, if I elongate the legs, this is gonna look wrong. You know. Jay Rinaldi says or asks, "What is your favorite stand-up comedians?"
Oh man. Yes, good question. Recently, Amy Schumer. I find her hilarious, especially her online tidbits. I find those so funny. And even her stand-up, I've been watching some of it. It's a little self-depreciating, which can get old quickly. And I think she doesn't need to. I think she's funny enough without the need to like poke fun at herself all the time. But I find it so funny, and she's pretty quick on her feet in terms of reacting to audience reaction when she does her stand-up, which I find that kind of refreshing as well. But Tina Fey will always have a place in my heart, and for a while, Louis C.K. was a big one too.
My favorite actual like act that I've seen is probably Robin Williams live on Broadway. That one's probably one of my top ones. I'm trying to think of like, I can't remember the names of a lot of them. I just know that they're really funny. I think the guy's Irish. He's like super Irish. I need to figure out what his name is though. He was really good. Oh, I love Nick Swardson. I love that guy. Have you ever seen the stand-ups?
Mm-mm.
Do you know who Nick Swardson is?
Guy from Parks and Rec?
No. That's Nick Swanson.
Yes.
Did you ever see Grandma's Boy?
No.
Have you seen any Adam Sandler film recently?
Probably
not.
I was gonna say Post-Click? No. Click I thought was good though.
Yeah, Click was really good. But yeah.
All right, really quick. So this guy has really heavy. This clothing is almost like unfitting where it's so big. So I want to focus on the folding and pushing on the fabric. And this is a tutorial we have on CG Cookie right now if you're interested on folding fabric. Because the worst thing I see is like when people outline or artists outline fabric. Like let's say this was an arm, and this like the sleeve was going over the arm itself, and like this was the edge of the sleeve, is to do this and then like throw in lines that are supposed to imply folding fabric. Now obviously like if it's cartoony or if it's a style, like I can understand simplifying it, but there's a way to understand how to do it accurately and then simplifying it afterwards, and you'll see that then when you simplify it, it still reads a lot more accurate than when you just imply reference lines, especially for folding fabric. So I would check out that tutorial, but just know for like the next, I want to say like 5 minutes maybe, I'm going to be focusing on really heavy folding, and that's why I wanted to give a quick intro before I do it.
She wants to know if we ever do practical jokes on each other.
I would say we don't do it too often, or we don't do it often enough, is the real answer.
I don't react good to practical jokes.
I was gonna say, I don't feel like Joe's one that you do a joke to.
Benedict wants to know, can concept art combine with illustration? Is there a middle ground?
That's an interesting question. I think like the instant reaction in my head was, well, of course there is. But then when I really think about it, I don't know, because I think those two definitions are very industry related, and in the industry, usually it does cater more toward concept art or illustration. I guess sometimes there's a look to illustration where it looks more concept art-ish, but yeah, I don't know. I want to say yes, but I really don't. I can't think of any off the top of my head.
I was gonna say can't, because you can technically, because illustration is telling a story in an art piece, right?
Can be, yeah.
And so like you can have concept art that you can just read the character and like know the story behind the character. So
I guess it's like the idea behind it. If it was meant to be a concept, then it's concept art. If it's meant to be an illustration, it's illustration.
yeah. And I mean, people can render on the level of illustration for concept too.
Yes, but if their intent going into it was like detailing it all out, I would consider that an illustration. Man, that's tough.
I know. It can be like both. Mike asks, what is better, Wacom or Surface Pro 3?
Neither. I actually, whenever I get talked about with tablets, like I'm using a really old Intuos 3 tablet, and before this I had a Bamboo, and the Bamboo worked just as fine. So I don't think, it really does come down to personal preference, and I don't like the idea that one's better than the other. I think it really does come down to the artist and what they're comfortable with. Like sometimes it could come even down to the pen that comes with the tablet, and if it's comfortable for them or not. Like I know I've had a few tablets I've tried out where I really didn't like the grip on the pen, and that like dissuaded me from the whole tablet itself. So I think it really is like a personal connection on whether or not you like the tablet. There are some though like that have like technical issues, and I think that's a whole nother beast in itself.
We keep getting some really awesome questions.
Neato. Are you looking through them?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out which one I want to do.
All of them.
It's kind of similar. Like we keep getting questions that are about tablets. So it's like, what digital tablet do you recommend to beginners of digital art and animation?
You know, I think that kind of goes back to the last question. I think go test them out. Go to an actual store, and if you really can't find a store where you can test them out, don't feel bad about going more the cheap route if you really can't afford it. Don't feel like you have to get a Cintiq or something that's ultra fancy just because you see a lot of digital arts using that. Just know like you can use a Bamboo and be just as successful.
Raspberry, that's an awesome name, says, do you have any tips on how to start loving your own art again? I've currently been finding myself in this loop of not feeling like anything I do is ever good enough to post or even to finish. I get stuck on the base part. Any suggestions on fixing this? Yeah,
actually, this is something I would say happened recently. And I think, Joe, you can even talk about this too, where I kind of fell out of wanting to do digital art. I really fell in love with doing traditional. I felt more at home doing it. It felt more like I was putting personal touches on it, and I like jumped off of doing digital completely, like the last 4 months almost. And it's a weird thing to go back to because the reason that I think I fell off was because of other people, and admittedly it's wrong. You shouldn't be doing art for other people or have your art be or what you produce be based on what gets the most likes or what gets the most feedback. And I think I was just getting such a positive response from sketching and doing traditional that I kind of jumped on that bandwagon completely. And I will admit that I still was having fun with it. Don't get me wrong. I really like doing traditional, but I think it completely dissuaded me from doing any more digital work. So it was even like in the past, it was yesterday, I found a mixer brush on Photoshop by accident. And that's why, like, if you see all these blurry lines that I'm doing right now, I really like the look of that. And I kind of fell back in love with doing digital again. And even if I didn't care. Like, I did a drawing last night, and I was going to post it. I was like, I'm going to finish it tonight, and I'm not going to care if it gets as many likes or views as traditional. And I think as artists, sometimes we struggle with this, and we feel that the critical reception of what we make and what we post determines on whether or not that was a good piece of art or not. And I think we need to break that. I think it's a very sick way of doing art and creating art, and then it becomes art for the likes, not what it should be, which is art for yourself. And the good news is, when you fully develop your sense of style and you really do art that you love and you keep continuing to do that, over time, eventually, it's like having a following and even being considered a success or a top artist is almost like a byproduct of really following your own work and following what you want to create rather than feeling like what you are forced to create. So keep creating what you want to create and don't feel pressured by not getting enough likes or not having the critical response of what, let's say, like a fan art piece might get compared to your original stuff.
Yeah, I was going to say, you said that the other day where you're just like, fear isn't what should be driving.
Yeah.
That's not who's driving the car, you know?
Yeah, what do you want to say about that?
Recently for a while there, I was doing a lot of comic book Marvel paintings, and I was getting a lot of good feedback from it, like really good feedback, and people loved it, and people were like, oh, this is amazing, and so I just kept doing it. But what happened is I have a huge love for anime and simplification, and so every couple of months or so, my brain will be like, you need to be drawing anime because you love it. And so I can do several different styles, I guess, but I really love the look of anime and how elegant and pretty it can get. So that's what I keep going back to, and that's what's making me happy. So right now my style is going back into this anime-esque form to try to find that style that's going to make me really enjoy doing art again and feel that like freshness of being like, oh yeah, I remember Spike Spiegel, or I remember trying to draw this and then not being able to do it, and now I can because I studied a bunch of other things and then came back to it. But it's
like a perfect example then of this.
Yeah. I guess if you feel like you're not loving it because you feel like you changed styles or something, definitely try to remember what you used to love about making art in the first place. That's huge, you know?
That's huge.
Yeah. There's two questions that are kind of on the same topic. They're both about character design.
Okay.
Leah Hosgood says, I'm working on a character and I was wondering if you have any tips on character design. I want my character to relate to the audience, but he has a lot of alien-like features. Should I push for a more humanoid element or go crazy with it like I want to?
Let me read some of this again. I want my character to relate to the audience. Oh, okay. So the worst thing you can do is make it look more human to make it feel more human. I can't tell you how many movies or little shorts that I've watched where it might even be like inanimate objects, but it's the way that they handle situations, or they like look at Toy Story. I guess those are more humanoid though. Wally. I mean, he has some human features in him, like the eyes, obviously, and hands, but for the most part, he's a robot. But the reason I think people connected to him so much was his personality and the way that he handled his self, and then he fell in love. And I think connecting on a human emotion level is so much more important than having it look humanistic for it to connect to the audience. So I think have your focus be on connecting to the human spirit rather than focus on making it look humanistic.
I was gonna say, yeah, like think about all the dogs that Pixar and Disney's ever made.
Yeah.
They're dogs, but at the same time, I guess they have the expressions that they have are very somewhat humanoid.
I was trying to like think of a movie where it was literally just like an object. Or okay, I didn't really like the movie, but that movie Rubber, where it was like the tire that was a serial killer, and like
What?
oh, okay, this is not. I don't recommend this to anyone. Don't go watch. This is not like a. Oh, Tim told me to watch this. Don't ever associate me with Rubber. But it was just a tire. It didn't talk. It didn't do anything. It rolled around and then it would kill people through telekinesis. But it had a personality to it. It had this like. I hated. I did not like this piece of rubber. And it was a rubber wheel, but like it had a character to it, and it was hard to deny that. So you can create humanistic features without even needing words or having any traits that are similar to a human. Oh, I almost like shudder the fact that I just mentioned that movie in a live stream.
I completely forgot what I was gonna say because all I could think of was a tire going around killing people.
Watch the trailer after this. I'll show it to you. Anyways, we need to move on. I don't want it. I don't want this taking any more time.
Aaron Huggins says, "Hey guys, I have a problem with picking color palettes and lighting schemes. Do you have any tips for things I can do by improving in these areas? Thank you."
Oh man, we are literally creating a whole color course that will be out next month, and we're going to cover a lot of that. But as just like a simple starting point to work with for the stream, so like the color I knew I was going to work with is yellow. So you can see in the corner, the only one that might be like a true yellow when people associate yellow in their minds is like this really bright, awful yellow. Well, in my opinion, I just never liked the oversaturated neon yellow. So to work with that, I pulled in a bunch of more neutral yellows, almost like more mustard colors, and I'm having those be the dominant color to work with on the piece, and the very saturated yellows you'll see are like there's hints of them in places, and I'll add more as I do some of the highlights as well. But just know when choosing your color palettes, usually stay away from oversaturated colors and have those colors be represented in areas that you want the eye to focus on, or the viewer's eye to focus on. There are exceptions, like if you know the artist Purple Kekleon, Mel uses a great use of saturated colors, but she does it well. She does it where it's not an eyesore to look at. It's not overbearing, and that just comes with practice working with saturated colors. And I would just recommend first getting comfortable working with more neutral colors, and then having those saturations pop in different areas where you really want the viewer to look.
Raspberry, I guess, has been replying several times. Apparently, we didn't answer the question correctly.
Which one?
That was the one about not being able to care about their art.
Oh.
Says, well, that really doesn't answer my question because it's really about anything from traditional to digital. It doesn't matter. I just feel like nothing I make is good enough for me.
Nothing is good enough for you. I feel like this could be a few things. The first one could be a problem that one of my new friends had recently, where they know what they want to create, they just can't get to the level of quality that they want to achieve. And that can be really discouraging. But it's that idea of you need to bridge the gap between where you are and where you want to be. And that bridge, it's not a step, it's not a jump, it's a really long bridge. And to get to the other side, you have to build the planks and build the bridge itself to get over there. And that takes time and that takes practice. But man, I feel like I just made up this analogy and I'm just going to run with it. But every time you make a new plank to build, you become faster, and it becomes easier once you get over different areas in the bridge. But then there will be times where you make great progress and you're like halfway across the bridge, and then you see the other side and you're like, man, I'm only halfway there. Even when you look back, you see all the work you've done, but you still haven't gotten to where you want to be. Now, here's the part where I don't want to discourage you, but I want you to be realistic in what to expect. Once you finally bridge the gap and you get to the area, that area that you've been wanting to get to, and you feel like, yes, I achieved like greatness, there's going to be a new island and a bigger island or a better island that you want to, once again, bridge the gap to. And it's going to continue to happen over and over and over again. So rather than fighting it or letting it like eat at you, that you'll never 100% be satisfied with your art. There'll be. I mean, don't see that as a negative thing. Try to see that as a positive thing, and that you'll always have that urgency or that fire to want to get better, and that's not a bad thing. And I'm hoping this answers your question, because there have been times where, yeah, I've hated everything I created. It was not to the level that I wanted it to be. I felt it looked cheap, or even sometimes I felt like I myself was not good enough. I felt like I could not, even to this day I still have days where I just feel like I'm not good enough. I don't want to be where I'm at right now. And yeah, it's frustrating. And the only thing you have to deal with is yourself, and it's how you respond to that. You can either be miserable and like dwell in your self-pity, or you do something about it and you go out there and you push yourself, you learn, you watch videos, and it can be frustrating. I can't tell you how many times I've not wanted to watch a video because I didn't know how to do it, and to accept the idea that I don't know how to do it and I need help. And that's not a bad thing. So I'm hoping this answers your question. If not, please be more specific, because I want to help you out. I know what it's like to be in a state of just not being happy with your work, and I want to help you get through this. By the way, I just found out this guy has red hands. When I'm looking at the reference, he has red hands and arms, which I'm in love with the fact of that, so that's why he has red hands, if anyone was wondering.
I didn't realize he was so like ketchup and mustardy.
A little bit, yeah.
Oh, there were so many good questions on here.
Isn't that a good thing?
Lotus Nevermore. This is something that I actually thought about when we were talking about characters that aren't human but still have like a human tendency. Is the lamp from Pixar, the one that jumps up onto the screen and then crushes the eye?
There we go. Yeah. That's a perfect example. Or I guess people that attach feelings to having a pet rock.
Very important question from Mars Lyrics is, do you guys love potatoes?
I'm Irish. Do you even need to ask? I actually don't know if you like potatoes or not.
I enjoy potatoes. I can't do a ton of potatoes. Like I couldn't eat, like so we did a crock pot of potatoes. I wouldn't be able to eat all of those potatoes. I'd probably feel sick afterwards. But I mean, I love me some twice baked potatoes and mashed potatoes.
Yeah.
Here's a question that you kind of answered in yourself when asking this question, Heather. It says, no matter how hard I try, I can't get my characters in perspective with the background. It just looks off and I can't figure out why. Do you have any tips or exercises? With that, I was going to say, I mean, you can, I would suggest just Googling, you know, how to put a character in perspective and in background. If we like, as far as like what do we suggest, practice drawing boxes in perspective, because if you can put a box in perspective, you can put a person in perspective, because you can fit a person inside of a box. That sounds a little demented.
Like, what do you do on your free time, Joe?
That's what I do in my spare time. I just stuff people in boxes.
Stuff people in boxes.
I
would say that is a tough one when trying to put a character, because you really got to have an understanding of perspective. And I think even I cheat that sometimes, but if it looks wrong, rather than like kill yourself on being like, oh, why is this looking off? Like, why can't I figure it out? Ask for another opinion. Ask for another artist to look at your work. And I almost guarantee if you will ask more than one, but one of those artists will be able to point out something to you where you'll be like, you'll have a eureka moment of, oh my gosh, how did I not see that? Of course, with the leg pulled back just like a little bit, it feels like she's more grounded. All right, so hold on. I'm going to quickly, because we're at our hour point, so I have like a half hour left. So what I'm going to do is, I guess first I want to explain what I've been doing this whole time with the blur effect that you're kind of seeing here. All right, so there's two things that we're going to go over. The first is using the mixer tool. So I'm going to switch back to my full screen rather than it being just the Photoshop canvas. All right, so move this out of the way. Okay, so the way that I'm working this is I want the eye to be directed in the center areas of the character, so the edge I want to be more out of focus. And I've always loved this look, but I was never able to get it quite to the way I wanted it until yesterday when I was messing and I was playing around with the tool more, where I feel like I'm learning how to use it more effectively. So in this case, this hand right here is too in focus, and I want it to be a little more blurry. So under the brush menu, there's a mixer tool brush. So now when you click it, you pick the brush that you want to use, and I'm using one that has a texture to it. So it's one of the brushes you can actually download off of CG Cookie. It's the first texture brush. And you can see, like, as we blur it, it gives some of that texture as a byproduct. Now, you can clear the brush. So I guess I should explain. You can either mix the colors with a pre-color already chosen. So if you, let's imagine this was a painting, you can either have a brush that you just washed in the water, or you can have a brush that has some paint that you just put on it. So in this case, I have this yellow mustard paint on it, but if we clean it, it's blank. So then from here, I'm almost pretty much working with a clean brush, and I'm just mixing the colors that are underneath of it. And if it's not mixing, it's probably because you don't have the sample all layers checked. So you need to do that. Now, I'm working on a single layer, but normally if I'm working on multiple layers, you wouldn't be able to see it unless if you check that. So now the other thing I want you to just focus on before I kind of move on is there's this brush menu where you can either have more of a dry, a moist, a wet, or a very wet brush. Now pretty much it implies the idea of it looking traditional. So you can either have a very wet brush, which you can imagine there'd be like a lot of water still absorbed into the bristles of the brush, and then when you mix it, there's a lot more mixing. Then when if it's dry, it'll be more of like a rub. It's almost like when you're doing drawing with a pencil and or charcoal, and you're like blending it that way. So it's kind of a fun little thing to experiment with. And usually what I do is I'll blend it, go back to my brush tool. Oops, let me grab. Sharpen some areas up. And blend it out. Now the reason I like this is for spit painting, it really is just for laying down values or colors quickly without it being distracting. So in this case, I laid it down and I knew I wanted a fold on the edge of the fabric, so I just laid down yellow really quickly. But when I do that, you can see how there's like some opacity to it and it kind of stands out. So then I just blend it in really quick, and it's like a really quick way to achieve the look of blending without using your brush tool to work it over and over again to make it look clean. All right, so that was the first one. What was the second thing I wanted to show you guys? Oh, okay. The second thing is I'm going to show you how to color balance. So this is something I use in every piece that I've ever done, at least in the past like 6 months. I learned it earlier this year, and I love it. You can't overdo it, just like the liquify filter, so just know this is something that you should use conservatively, and more as like a final polish. Okay, so I'm going to make a duplicate of this layer, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Image, and if you don't have it flattened, I would flatten it first, make a copy, and then undo the flatten so that you can save all the layers you had previously, but then paste the one that is flattened so that you can work with just one single layer. So now from here, I'm going to go to Image, Adjustments, Color Balance. Now this is a very powerful tool. So I'm going to adjust some things and I'll let you guys see what that does. And the main thing I want you to focus on is you can adjust the midtones, the highlights, and the shadows. Alright, so on the midtones, you can see how when I adjust it, what it's doing, and I really should have looked up the terminology behind this, but pretty much it's affecting the middle tones in your piece, and if they have more of a yellow tint, you can either adjust them to be more yellow or more blue. Now, when we think of this character, it's primarily yellow, so instinctively we might think, oh, well, we should make it more yellow. But it's not really adding interest. If anything, it's almost like draining out a lot of the other colors, and it's becoming less interesting. Now, if we push it this way, where we add more blue tints, and let me do an OK so you can see before and after, you can see how having some of the midtones be pushed toward blue actually adds more contrast between the background and subject matter, because now the background has a bit more of a purple look to it against the character that's more yellow. So let me do it on all of them, and I'll show you a before and after. Because this is something that I think I found through YouTube, and then one of my friends, Paul Hoffner, he works at Riot, and he was the one that introduced this to me last year. But it didn't like stick with me when he first showed it to me, and then only recently did I started using it again because I stumbled upon it on YouTube. And I was like, oh, I really liked the way that made the final image look, and he was able to do that really quickly. So then I took it upon myself to mess with this and really understand. I guess I still don't completely understand it because I was experimenting. I still am experimenting, just like I am with the mixer brush. And I wanted to show you guys that it's good to constantly experiment with what tools you have available to you. Because if you're not using all the tools that Photoshop or whatever software you're using, then you're only inhibiting yourself. You're only limiting yourself. Okay, so now this is after, and this is before. Now, I don't know how well you can see it on the live stream, but on my monitor itself, there's a huge difference between 1 and 2 in terms of harmony within the piece. And then from here, I would probably turn up some of the levels, the brightness and contrast. And this is where you can get really sucked into it, where try your best not to let this consume you. It's so easy to adjust or affect the overall image quickly, but I think too many artists jump to trying to get to the adjustment phase too fast, where really keep focusing on your foundation first and building it up, and then this is almost like a final polish. That's why I like to save this more toward the end. And then we'll see, so the before and after. So I really like the vibrancy that this is giving off now. I kind of like the almost like a light, soft pink that we got going on here. And it's like gradienting into the yellow. So now I'm going to do, let's see, I think I might do a few highlights. And man, we still have 20 minutes. See, like this I could almost consider done as like a character of SpitPaint. And I guess in a more true fashion, or I don't know, are SpitPaints more an hour or 90 minutes? I think they're more 90 minutes. So maybe I'll keep going. But I'm going to just work in some highlights here, and then let's try to get through as many questions as we can.
Okay.
I'm going to switch back to just my Photoshop file, though.
Brian from the workshop says, fun question. Did you guys see Face Off last night, and what was your favorite makeup?
Wait. Yes. I can't tell you how excited I am that you guys watch Face Off. Well, maybe not everyone, but some of you actually watch Face Off. That's my favorite, one of my favorite shows on TV. and I was drawing. Hold on, I need to get my sketchbook to explain what I did.
To answer the question, Ryan, my favorite was either the one that was like the egg shape on the bottom, or the one that actually won. I think it was Jordan and Ben. That head sculpt was sick. I love the concept for that head sculpt. Reminded me a lot of just like MMO creatures, which is really cool.
Okay. So the theme for you guys that didn't see the episode was Intergalactic Zoo, and Face Off is pretty much a prosthetics and makeup TV show, but it's kind of turned into like for movies or just kind of interesting art pieces. And their challenges, they challenge all these artists to create an animal that would be in an intergalactic zoo. So they had to also incorporate elements of like silver or azurite, whatever it might be, and it's random, and they have to come up with concept. And anyways, I get really excited talking about Face Off. So I really liked I like to draw when I watch Facebook, and this is what I was drawing yesterday. And the idea behind it is, what is it, albite? It's like this black element, and then has like this white crystallizing on the outside. It would have like a clear front to it, and you could see like this complex creature underneath like this gelatin shell that it has on it, and you don't know how it eats or how it communicates. And I think that is a really interesting idea of playing with like sci-fi, is not like giving them some elements that the viewer can understand, but then having elements that you wouldn't be able to explain just on first glance. Anyways, I'm sorry, I get excited about Face Off.
What was your favorite one from last night?
Oh, it was the praying mantis one that actually was in the bottom looks, but not because of the top half. The bottom one, where it had the flaking of the gold dust, and the way that they did the hard edges to conform with the face. I really, really liked that one.
Are you talking about Stevie's?
Yeah. So Stevie's, but overall, I was actually pretty impressed with everyone on the show in terms of creating something that big in a 3-day being the first challenge. So, yeah, I don't really have a clear set in my mind of who I want to win yet, which is kind of fun. Because usually after the first episode, I'm like, I think that person's going to win. They're the best. But this one, I haven't had that thought yet.
Eric's Art says, what's your opinion on comfort zones in real life? Should you try to escape them?
Absolutely. I feel like if I would have said, if any artist says no to that question, then I don't know if they're a true artist. It kind of goes back to that Marina Abramovic video that I posted a few weeks ago about what it means to be a true artist. And a true artist is, one, someone that always has the need and the want to create. Like it actually becomes bothersome when they're not able to create what's in their head. And that means you're an artist. So you have this want to create. Now, that doesn't make you a good artist, as she says, but that makes you an artist. Now, to be a good artist, you need to be constantly pushing yourself and challenging your way of thinking and how your process goes, and incorporating yourself into your art. And if you ever feel safe, or if you ever feel where you're recycling your own skill level, then you stopped being on the path to being a great artist. You settled for where you're at, and that's where your great artistry kind of ends until you decide to challenge yourself again. So get away from comfort zones. I understand that, yeah, it's kind of nice just doing, like for me, doing just profiles, drawing profiles, it's like my go-to. And every now and then it's just kind of fun to not have to think and just kind of go. But it's something that you can do it every once in a while, but you should always be challenging yourself in some way. Even if it's similar concept or subject matter, doing something on the subject matter that you've never done before is a good example of that.
Jill asks, do you ever use your art to impress girls or guys?
All the time. No.
Just no.
No. I actually can't say I've ever been like, hey, have you ever checked out my art? No, I've never done that.
Let me draw you like one of my French girls.
All right.
I'm going to have no reply to that question. I played the 5th. Mars Lyric says, how old were you when you sold your first piece of art, and how did it feel?
This is the question that you're pleading the 5th to?
No, the previous one.
Oh, how old when I sold my first piece of art? When I was in high school, I worked at a bakery, and for whatever reason, the owner asked me if well, not for whatever reason. He knew I did art, and I think he just wanted to support me in some way. So he asked if I could bring all my high school pieces to showcase in the coffee shop that was connected to the bakery. And I hung all of them up, and I put price tags next to them, not thinking anyone would buy it. And I had, I think, 3 sales. And that was a really weird feeling. It was the first time I ever had to like give a piece away, and admittedly, I felt hurt. It was really weird. I can't actually say I had a good experience giving or selling art for the first time. But now that I'm older, I think it's easier because I do digital art. And with the Kickstarter, I had to give away original sketches. But since I created the sketches with the intention of giving them away, I don't think I was as attached to them. I'm not trying to like dissuade anyone from selling original art, but just know there has to be a little bit of a disconnect, or the idea of you're okay with letting it go. But
Oh, Luis, be thankful you two are guys. You have no idea how many guys have asked me to draw their D.
what? Oh, you know what though? I have had a bunch of guys ask me to draw nudes of girls. I remember in high school, someone was like, "So how often do you just draw?" Actually, I don't want to be vulgar on this live stream, but you can assume what I'm gonna say. And I'd be like, never. Like that's not why I draw. But I can imagine, yeah, being a girl, it might be even more rough.
That's so bizarre though, because I would never be like, "Hey, I want you to draw my penis." Like I would never, you know.
I mean, I wouldn't either. I find that bizarre.
But I mean, she's from Europe though, isn't she?
Yeah.
Maybe they just.
I mean, it is more comfortable over there. I think America has this weird fear of nudity and sex in general, where it's not really prevalent in other countries as strongly. One of the best examples I think of is, Joe, do you know what the movie A Single Man is?
No.
It's one of Dwight's favorite movies. Anyways, it's rated R in America, and in Canada, it's PG. But the only reason we give it that rating is because it's not even like pure on the act of doing it, it's just implied. And for that reason alone, it got an R rating.
Huh. Lucid Kitsune says, I have a problem with making everything too detailed sometimes. I really want to make quicker paintings, speed paintings, and less refined things. Detailed art is great, but sometimes I just want to do something more loose. Any tips on this?
You should watch a tutorial that's on CG Cookie that I did called Throwing Ways, the importance of throwaways. And it's exactly what you're talking about, how you need to go into the piece without the idea that you're going to fully render it. Because then there is that disconnect of having every detail look perfect, and you can just go. A lot of the times, artists need almost like that permission to just go. I don't know why we have that on ourselves. It's almost like a restriction. But then allowing ourselves that permission will then in turn give usually pieces that are quicker. It might be more gestural, but a lot of the times it can even be more accurate in terms of the proportions or the way you lay down lighting, because you're not focusing on meticulous things. You're just focusing on it looking as great as you possibly can.
Mars Lyrics wants to know, can you guys dance?
Oh yeah, I can do the mashed potato. I can't do the new song though, whatever that. All the kids are dancing nowadays. I can't do that one. I can do the Running Man. Oh yeah. I won't do it on camera, no. Maybe one day if you're lucky, but no.
What's the saying? Tough guys don't dance.
Oh, tough guys don't cry, which I think is the opposite of true.
Probably both. I think those are both sayings.
Oh.
Okay, serious question.
Shoot.
How to pick colors that are different but are in the right amount?
How to pick colors that are different and in the right amount? I guess I don't understand the question. It is different and in the right amounts. Oh, okay. I think I know what you're talking about. So in this image alone, for the most part, a lot of the values and, oh, you can't see it, but on my color picker, a lot of the values and the saturations are neutral. So if this was my color picker, a lot of them should be like, even I would almost put here. It's like your golden kind of spot in your color picker is more in the middle and a little left of the saturation, because saturation is left to right, remember. Now, when we're doing like the highlights, we're trying to focus the eye in certain areas, that's when you can have a lighter, more saturated. You can go up on your value more, maybe it's up here. But you want to avoid using straight black for your shadows and straight white for your light sources. Where in this case, like look at the entirety of the clothing has no, or at least in the circle that is created, has no white or black. It's all a mixture of different value ranges in yellow and brown. And it's the idea that we can perceive value without the need of white and black. And it's one of the biggest mistakes I see younger artists when they just almost resort to using black as the shadow color. So don't feel like you absolutely need to. The other thing was, how do you pick colors as different? The right amounts. So I think the other part of I hope I'm answering this correctly for you, but the other thing that I wanted to say was choosing colors that complement each other well, and then there's a percentage. Like overwhelming, this character is very yellow and brown. I would say it's like a mixture, it's like a mustard, a dark mustard. And then having this red hand here, and even like this really, really deep red here, it's almost like a crimson. It is a contrast to the yellow, so immediately our eye is keep being drawn up here, and obviously the highlight draws the eye up here as well. But the red acts as such a nice contrast to the yellow and the brown hues that we were working with that it's this nice complement, and the colors work well together. So when choosing your colors, try to have that in mind of, do these colors work well together? Like if I had a lime green hand, let me really quickly. I'm trying to do something that would look bad. So you can see how this becomes almost more visually distracting, and it doesn't really, it almost clashes with the yellow. Let me see if I can make it even more obnoxious. Man, I would really have to make it. Like this is more obnoxious. Like those pinks, it could work. So that's why color is such a difficult thing to work with, because even with the rules that are set in place, you can still break them and have it look correct, or have it be interesting or visually interesting. So in this case, like I don't like the connection between this green and the yellow. I think it's more of a disconnect, where when it was red, I felt like it flowed a lot better together. So a lot of the times, choosing colors is almost like a personal thing, where the colors are very relative to how you view them and what your perception of the colors are. Like for me, I love working with red. Anything with red I enjoy working with, so I try to add it to any piece I can. And that's more of a personal preference. So I think it's good to just keep experimenting with color and know that it'll click over time. Like little things will click about working with color, and you'll kind of find your own palette that you always can be comforted in.
We got about 4 minutes. Did you want to take a look through the questions that you wanted to hit?
Yeah. Okay. So this was actually a really fun one for me, and I was curious how a SpitPaint would go because I haven't done a SpitPaint in so long. Okay. So let's see here. Do you recommend painting in grayscale first, followed by color, or go straight into coloring? I think this is also a personal thing, but I think it's good to experiment with both. I would say about 4 years ago, I definitely, for like a few months, I would work primarily in grayscale and then add color afterwards. So I kind of realized I did enjoy the process of just going straight into color, and I found my own method that worked for me. So I guess you got to find what works for you and stick with it. Don't feel pressured to go one way or the other just because a majority of artists do it one way. I feel like that could be said about almost any digital art technique or drawing or even creating art in general. You got to find what's right for you. Okay, let me keep going here. Is there a piece of art you made completely for yourself, something that will never be seen by anyone except you because it's so personal? Yeah, of course. Man, I feel like I even have a bunch in my room that I've never showed anyone, and I don't plan to ever show anyone. And I had this idea that before I died, I would give all my original sketches to my kids, and the ones that I didn't want anyone to see, I would burn. It would be like I guess my send-off. So yes, there are plenty that I made that I'll never show anyone. Let's see here. Oh yeah, if you're wondering, on Monday, so if you like Face Off, every Monday I'm doing a doodle art battle, which pretty much I'm gonna take usually around 4 artists, and for an hour and a half we're gonna be doing essentially what we did on the live stream, where it'll be a spit paint, and we'll battle each other with the given theme. So on Monday night, Central Time in America, we're gonna be doing the Intergalactic Zoo, and you can catch that if it's something that would interest you. Do I have a go-to character object theme that you draw or paint, like a motif or design in all your works? Yeah, I actually think it's almost more obvious when you look through my past work on, especially in the past like year. I would say feathers, organics, profiles, characters that are almost more gender neutral. Those are the themes I think I see myself creating again and again. Someone's asking, would living in a big city as an artist provide larger benefits than living in a suburban area or a smaller city? Typically, yeah. So like living in or like California, Texas, Florida, uh, Seattle, any of the big places where video game companies are prevalent, yeah, it's obviously more, I guess, essential to live there if you want to get started in the industry because the companies are there and you want to sometimes go where the work is. So in that case, it would be better, but if you want to be a freelancer, it really doesn't matter. You kind of find your own path. Like I thought I would have to move to Florida as soon as I graduated, and it turned out weird where I found a job in Illinois, and then as soon as they let me work remotely, I moved back to Wisconsin. So I would say just go with the flow. Never feel like you have to plan it out, and just I guess don't be dragged down with it. Just know it's a temporary thing. Like if you really hate living in the city but the job is there, just always view it as a temporary thing and that you'll be able to move somewhere else one day. You're not stuck there forever. Someone's asking, where did you get the mixer brush from? I think Joe was saying this might be a Creative Cloud or a CS6 feature or exclusive.
It's CS6 and above.
Okay, yeah. So if you're using CS5 or below or other softwares, well, actually, I think I'm almost positive a Corel Painter has to have something similar.
They have their software has pretty much that. Like their brushes automatically do what the mixer brush does. It's the same thing with Paint Tool SI.
Yeah. So I didn't get the mixer brush. I guess it was provided in Creative Cloud. So it's not like a download or an add-on that you tack on. What's this character's backstory? It's actually if you weren't here for the beginning, it's a toy that I'm getting. Let me pull up the image of it. So this is the toy or I shouldn't call it toy because then I really sound like a kid. It's a figure from 3A, and it's my favorite toy company, and I call them J-KUB, because he reminds me of my younger cousin Jake. Man, you guys had really good questions today. I actually had to like stop myself painting, and I could tell I was fumbling on my words sometimes because I really had to think about answering it correctly. Someone says, Joe, you're quite a delicate flower, aren't you?
Yes.
Have I ever tried pixel art? Yes, I love doing pixel art. It's actually one of my favorite styles to do. I just don't do it often enough. Okay, I'm gonna maybe pick one more. Some of these are funny too. Oh, okay. This is a good one to end it off. From Tijol is asking, how important is it to use the real color of the object you are painting? If you paint a yellow tomato, or as they might say, tomato, will it still read as a tomato to others? It should, is the short answer. But when choosing the colors for the object that you're working on, I think you're talking more about the hue identity, or oh, Joe, the word's slipping my mind. What's that called?
As far as
the actual color of an object. Shoot, hold on. I wrote it down. Let me go find it. Because this is a good one to end on.
Yeah, I just wanted to just call it hue identity.
No, there's another word for it though. Hold on. Let's gotta look at that whiteboard picture we posted.
Someone, or Pam says, your younger cousin reminds you of an axe murderer.
He is, yeah. Oh, local color.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Okay, so for instance, on this character, the local color, or the hue identity of his jumpsuit is probably more of like this color. And the idea is you should work with this color as your foundation color. And then when you do your highlights or your shadows, add them on accordingly and accurately, but don't let the shadow or the highlight overtake the local color unless if it's intentional. Otherwise, then the object itself might read as that shadow or that highlight color. We'll go more over this in the color course, but pretty much when you're working on, let's say, the tomato, if I drew a tomato that was like this, and I was just talking to Joe about how important this is, or if like another artist started like this, and then they added lighter red, two artists could look at, if this was the same tomato, two artists could interpret it as this if they were looking at it from life, because it's the interpretation, but also in their mind they're working with a different lighting scenario where the top one might be more in shadow and the local color would actually be this red right here in the highlight. And then for this one, it's very heavily lit and has a lot of like bounce lighting and fill light, where then the local color would actually be this red. And the idea is that these reds should be the exact same because they're the same tomato. And they're just lit differently. It's easier to explain when you have examples in front of you. So when we do the color course, I'm going to create a few different examples. And I'm going to even take pictures with Joe, because working from life is a really easy way to learn and understand. So I'm trying not to confuse you, but pretty much just know when you're working on trying to make the object look like the actual color it is, just be more limited with your highlight and shadow use, and be aware that the shadows and the highlights can overtake the local color to make it look like that's the actual color of the object. Okay, I think that's going to be the end of our stream. Thank you guys for coming to today's stream. We do these every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Central Time, and that's in the States. It's -5 GMT. Like I said earlier, we have the contest that's going to be announced most likely next week. Don't quote me on that. And we're going to start working on the color course soon, too. So thank you guys for coming to the stream. And we'll post all the links of the things we talked about, from the Imagine FX to the books and the artist, in the community post on CG-Cookie, on the community on CG-Cookie. And we'll, I guess, hopefully see you next time. And that's all I got. What about you, Joe?
Yeah, I was going to say see you guys next week, and definitely check out the community.
Yep. That's all I got. See you guys.
Bye.